Now it sounds like the Cleveland Browns are going to all but imprison Shedeur Sanders in the football sense of a very talented rookie quarterback who obviously needs reps.
The NFL never imagined that one rookie quarterback could hold so much power over its bottom line, but the numbers don't lie. The moment Shedeur Sanders wasn't on the field, viewership plummeted, sponsors grew restless, and ticket demand cooled in ways that sent a ripple of panic through the league office. For a sport that prides itself on being bigger than any one player, the sudden ratings drop without Sanders has exposed a fragile reality. Fans are tuning in for him specifically, and now with every snap he doesn't take, the NFL looks increasingly desperate to keep its newest star front and center. TV ratings dipped by millions the week Shedeur Sanders wasn't on the field, a measurable collapse that stunned both league executives and network broadcasters. Nationally, average viewership for the Browns game fell nearly 27% compared to the previous week. And in Cleveland, the local rating dropped from a 17.8 share to just above 12, a plunge that erased months of steady momentum. Streaming numbers told the same story. YouTube TV and Amazon Prime reported far fewer concurrent viewers for a matchup that on paper should have been one of the preseason's top draws. This wasn't about the opponent or the timing. The missing variable was Sanders. That absence became glaring the moment broadcasters noticed highlight packages shrinking, social media engagement flatlining, and advertisers quietly expressing concern that their primetime slots had lost a star who delivered attention with every snap. The immediate consequences reached beyond television. Ticket resale markets in Cleveland collapsed overnight, with average seat prices falling from $178 in the secondary market to barely $95 once word spread Sanders would not be active. Even fans who had bought in months ahead began unloading tickets, leaving swaths of the stadium emptier than expected for a preseason slate that, historically, Cleveland had sold through when hyped rookies were involved. Merchandise sales reflected the same drop-off, with official NFL Shop data showing Sanders' jersey slipping from the number 3 spot league-wide to outside the top 10 in just one inactive week. Retailers reported that walk-in traffic fell sharply in Ohio outlets, underscoring how closely tied consumer behavior already is to the quarterback's presence. From a betting standpoint, sportsbooks faced a chilling effect they rarely encounter in preseason play. Prop bet volume for Browns-related wagers shrank by 41% compared to the prior week, with parlays and player props disappearing almost entirely once it became clear Sanders wouldn't play. Sportsbooks, which had quietly counted on his hype to inflate handle during the slower August window, scrambled to push alternative lines, but the energy wasn't there. Analysts even noted that nationally televised NFL preseason games without Sanders were trending behind college football exhibitions in terms of engagement, a shocking reversal for a league that typically dominates the sports calendar in August. Networks, too, were caught flat-footed. ESPN's studio show cut its Browns segment to less than 3 minutes, and Fox, which had planned to roll out a feature comparing Sanders to early career Russell Wilson, shelved it entirely when his absence undercut the narrative. Broadcasters rely on marquee figures to drive casual viewership, and Sanders had quickly become that rare rookie capable of producing spikes normally reserved for established stars like Patrick Mahomes or Tom Brady. Without him, producers scrambled to fill time with generic injury reports and recycled training camp storylines, leaving broadcasts flatter, less urgent, and critically, less profitable for advertisers who had paid premiums expecting Sanders' face to lead coverage. The desperation was most evident behind closed doors. Executives from CBS and NBC, both with upcoming Browns games, reportedly contacted league officials to confirm Sanders' status for nationally broadcast slots. Advertisers tied to those broadcasts have performance clauses in their contracts, many of which hinge on viewership numbers. A 20% rating slide in just 1 week set off alarms about potential refunds or renegotiations, putting additional pressure on both the team and the NFL itself to ensure Sanders is featured prominently moving forward. For a league that insists no one player is bigger than the shield, the frantic response to his absence betrayed a different truth. Right now, Sanders is not just a Cleveland storyline. He is the NFL's most bankable property, and the contrast was glaring when measured against other rookies. CJ Stroud's early starts in Houston barely moved local numbers last year, and even Trevor Lawrence's debut in Jacksonville brought only modest national boosts. Sanders, however, had already pushed Cleveland into the top 3 of national merchandise sales and delivered one of the NFL Network's highest preseason ratings in 5 years during his first outing. His absence then wasn't just felt, it was quantifiable, cutting into every measurable stream of NFL business. business from TV ratings to ticket stubs. The league prides itself on next man up, but the market has made one thing brutally clear. When Sanders isn't in uniform, the NFL's numbers bleed red. The ripple effect of Shedeur Sanders' absence is more than a one-week ratings hiccup. It's a direct challenge to how the Browns and the NFL conduct business in real time. Cleveland's coaching staff, led by Kevin Stefanski, lost critical evaluation reps that were supposed to define the early depth chart. Sanders missing those game snaps means Stefanski has less film of him against top-line defenders, less chemistry with the starting offensive line, and fewer opportunities to see how he handles NFL speed. That matters because the Browns' quarterback situation is already delicate. Sanders was drawing between 28 to 32 practice reps with the starters each session before his absence, but without live game action, those numbers feel hollow. Unlike a practice, preseason film is currency in the NFL. Missing it forces Cleveland to lean on guesswork, which isn't the foundation you want when the front office is weighing a $250 million future against a mid-round veteran backup like Dylan Gabriel. From the league's perspective, the void shows up in ways that can't be ignored. Social media activity around Browns games cratered by almost half compared to the weeks when Sanders suited up. Hashtags that had been trending nationally during his debut barely registered, and highlight reels that normally eclipse 1 million views in 24 hours struggled to clear 300,000. That's not just engagement slipping, it's lost ad revenue, diminished fan buzz, and less leverage for the NFL when negotiating streaming deals. Amazon, which had quietly celebrated a 19% spike in preseason Thursday night football streams with Sanders on the field, faced a reversal when he didn't play. Their numbers dropped below 2022 levels, a fact that executives privately admitted was alarming given how much the league had promised advertisers about Sanders' drawing power. The gambling handle followed the same arc. Sportsbooks reported a 48% decrease in Browns-related action when Sanders sat out, particularly on player props that had become a hot commodity in his debut. Bettors had wagered heavily on his passing yard totals, rushing attempts, and even speculative touchdown props in prior weeks. Without him, the only significant wagers left were on over-under lines for the team as a whole, which don't generate the same engagement. For context, the average rookie quarterback prop market in preseason rarely exceeds a few $1,000,000 in handle, but Sanders alone had pushed those numbers closer to $12 million nationally during his first outing. That type of swing is extraordinary, and his absence sent a chill through an industry that had grown accustomed to a steady upward curve. Merchandise sales also painted the picture of why this matters right now. In August, rookie jerseys usually fade behind established stars like Mahomes, Burrow, and Allen, yet Sanders had cracked the top 3 overall, surpassing even Aaron Rodgers in some weekly rankings. The week he didn't play, his jersey sales dipped by nearly 35%, dropping him to 9th, and Browns gear across all categories saw a 14% slide. For Nike, which has invested heavily in marketing Sanders as a face of its next generation campaign, those numbers were a flashing warning sign. They have marketing rollouts queued for the regular season, but a cooling trend in preseason suggests vulnerability if he's not consistently visible. Attendance metrics confirmed the fallout wasn't just on screens or in shops. Cleveland's preseason home opener with Sanders active sold through to 99% capacity, with resale tickets trading at more than double face value. The following week, once his inactive status spread, attendance dropped by nearly 8,000 bodies in the stadium, and resale tickets struggled to hold even 15% above cost. For a market that had been desperate for quarterback stability since the post-Bernie Kosar era, Sanders represented a unique wave of optimism. His absence punctured that optimism and put the Browns back into the same malaise that plagued them during years of inconsistency. Fans didn't just notice, they responded with their wallets. In pure football terms, the lost exposure has a developmental cost that carries weight for the season ahead. Sanders' completion percentage in practices hovered at 68%, but without live game testing against disguised coverages and disguised blitz packages, those reps risk inflating his readiness. For quarterbacks, decision-making under real pressure is the separator between a highlight reel prospect and a winning NFL starter. Every inactive week delays his acclimation to those conditions, leaving the Browns potentially unprepared to evaluate whether Sanders can carry them through the early schedule. And because Cleveland's offensive line rotation has been patchy due to injuries. Missing those shared reps amplifies the risk of communication breakdowns when the games count. The why now piece matters because preseason and early regular season games aren't just entertainment, they're business touchpoints. The NFL is in the middle of billion-dollar negotiations with networks for new Sunday ticket and primetime carve-outs. Numbers tied to Sanders directly influence those negotiations because executives can now point to evidence that his presence lifts ratings by double digits. When he's absent, those numbers collapse. The urgency is heightened by the fact that this is not a midseason slump or a small market issue. This is the NFL watching one player swing national metrics before he's even played a regular season game. That sort of volatility creates both opportunity and risk. In short, Sanders missing time isn't a Cleveland story. It's a league-wide vulnerability. The Browns lose developmental reps, Stefanski loses evaluation tape, sportsbooks lose handle, retailers lose sales, and the NFL loses negotiating leverage with broadcasters. The timing could not be worse because every week without him costs millions in measurable value. That's why this matters now. Sanders isn't just a prospect waiting his turn. He's already a revenue engine, and the league can't afford to let that engine stall. Unlike most rookies who enter the league, Shedeur Sanders has already created a ratings footprint that makes his absence uniquely damaging. History offers plenty of examples of hyped quarterbacks, but very few whose lack of participation visibly tanked viewership. Take Andrew Luck's rookie preseason in 2012. Indianapolis saw a bump in local numbers when he played, but when he sat out, ratings only softened by a few points. With Sanders, the drop is dramatic, swinging by millions nationally and nearly a third in local markets. That level of influence isn't just unusual, it's almost unprecedented. Even Johnny Manziel, who entered the NFL with comparable media buzz in Cleveland, only moved preseason television ratings by single digits. His jersey sales soared early, but broadcasters never panicked when he missed time. Sanders has already surpassed that threshold, which says less about Cleveland's desperation for a star and more about the way the modern NFL ecosystem amplifies certain figures through social media, streaming, and gambling culture. Another telling comparison comes from Patrick Mahomes' rookie year. Kansas City barely used him in preseason, opting instead to let Alex Smith carry the bulk of reps. The Chiefs still drew strong television numbers because Mahomes wasn't yet branded as a must-watch star. In Sanders' case, the dynamic is reversed. Before taking a regular season snap, his name alone has become the hook networks and sponsors are leaning on. Unlike Mahomes, Sanders doesn't have the luxury of a slow rollout. His absence doesn't just raise questions about development, it actively dents the NFL's bottom line. That shift reveals how much the league's marketing has changed in less than a decade, with digital metrics now driving broadcast expectations in real time. There's also the Trevor Lawrence comparison. The Jaguars' preseason debut with Lawrence in 2021 brought modest national interest, but nothing close to a surge. Local markets perked up, and jersey sales briefly spiked, yet ESPN and Fox didn't cut features when he sat. Lawrence was billed as a long-term savior, but the league didn't immediately hinge viewership on him. Sanders, however, has already produced metrics that echo not rookies, but established stars. NFL Network's highest-rated preseason broadcast since 2018 came during Sanders' debut. That places him in the company of Mahomes and Brady, whose appearances historically delivered double-digit bumps. The fact that a rookie in Cleveland has entered that tier before week 1 suggests something closer to a cultural phenomenon than a normal rookie storyline. For Cleveland specifically, the contrast is painful when compared to the Browns' previous quarterback eras. Baker Mayfield's rookie year drew national attention, but the biggest spikes came when he delivered on-field fireworks, like the Jets game in 2018 where he broke the Browns' winless streak. Sanders' draw, by contrast, has been preemptive. He is boosting numbers simply by being expected to play, which explains why his absence triggered such visible collapses across ratings, merchandise, and ticket sales. The Browns have never had a player whose mere presence on a depth chart reshaped secondary ticket markets weeks in advance. That's the type of leverage typically reserved for teams like Dallas or Green Bay, franchises with decades of built-in national followings. Sanders has short-circuited that process, giving Cleveland a star with instant pull. The Tebow phenomenon also provides a useful lens. When Tim Tebow was with Denver and later the Jets, broadcasters leaned heavily on him to drive coverage. His start spiked ratings, his jersey sales NFL's top charts, and his presence alone kept fan bases engaged. But the key difference is that Tebow's absence never collapsed markets in the same way. Fans tuned in to see him succeed or fail, but they still watched when he wasn't active. With Sanders, there's evidence fans are actively tuning out without him. That shift represents a higher stakes dependency. It's one thing to capitalize on a player's presence. It's another to suffer tangible losses in his absence. Even looking at college comps reinforces how singular this is. Sanders' time at Colorado turned that program into one of the most watched in the country, with viewership jumping 200% over prior seasons. His transfer didn't just move ratings, it rewired the college football media cycle. Now that same gravitational pull has carried over to the NFL, but in a league where ratings already dominate American sports, the absence of one rookie moving national numbers backward is both alarming and historic. All of these comparisons paint the same picture. Sanders isn't following the rookie blueprint, he's rewriting it. Luck, Lawrence, Mayfield, Tebow, even Mahomes all drew attention in their ways, but none forced the league into visible desperation when they sat out. Sanders already has, and that reality puts Cleveland and the NFL in uncharted waters. His presence doesn't just boost numbers, it props up narratives, fuels gambling, drives merchandise, and fills stadiums. Without him, the contrast is stark, and the desperation creeping in from league executives feels justified. The business layer behind Shedeur Sanders' absence makes the desperation in the league offices almost impossible to hide. At its core, the NFL is a media company disguised as a sports league, and every network partner depends on star-driven narratives to keep their advertising inventory inflated. Sanders had already become that storyline before taking a single meaningful snap, and his absence has undercut months of planning tied to broadcast revenue. Networks like NBC and CBS had lined up feature packages, highlight reels, and even halftime ad rotations built around his appearances. When the viewership dip materialized, the financial reverberations were immediate. Industry analysts estimated that a single percentage point slide in NFL primetime viewership can cost networks upwards of $20 million across a season in lost ad leverage. Sanders' absence led to drops far larger than that in just 1 week, cutting into the value broadcasters were counting on. The sponsorship side may be even more fragile. Companies like Nike, Gatorade, and FanDuel had tethered marketing campaigns to Sanders' visibility, banking on him being one of the most featured athletes in early fall. Nike in particular has already seen return on investment volatility. Their preseason rollout campaign highlighted Sanders as a centerpiece of their next-gen quarterback series, but the moment he sat, jersey sales fell 35% week over week, erasing millions in projected revenue. Gatorade, which had planned to feature him in a nationally televised spot during Week 1 broadcasts, reportedly pushed internal discussions about delaying the ad if Sanders' visibility wavered. These sponsorships are not simply tied to on-field performance, they are tied to exposure volume, and exposure depends on participation. The league's broadcast partners are uniquely sensitive because NFL advertising slots are the most expensive in American sports. A 30-second ad during Sunday Night Football averages $850,000. That price is justified by ratings consistency, but when those numbers crack, advertisers start asking for make goods, which essentially are refunds in the form of free future ad space. Losing Sanders for even a stretch of preseason forced Fox and ESPN into crisis meetings about whether their September ad inventory might need to be discounted. For a league that prides itself on bulletproof financials, these behind-the-scenes recalibrations reveal the risk of putting so much weight on one player's presence. Fan sentiment also underscores the desperation. Cleveland fans had been flooding social media with clips, memes, and analysis every time Sanders touched the field, driving some of the highest engagement numbers for an NFL rookie this decade. The week he sat out, engagement cratered by half, and the void was filled with criticism of the league and coaching staff. Hashtags shifted from hashtag Go Browns and hashtag Sanders season to hashtag Play Shedeur, with frustrated fans tagging the NFL and team accounts. That shift matters because the NFL's entire digital strategy is built on turning highlight clips into viral content. Losing Sanders' highlights means losing millions of impressions and clicks, which in turn weakens the ad ecosystem on platforms like Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube, where sponsors increasingly expect returns. Even the resale ticket market illustrates the deeper context. SeatGeek and StubHub both reported Browns tickets tied to Sanders' projected starts were trading at premiums 2.5 times higher than other preseason games. When he was ruled inactive, that premium evaporated. Some tickets listed at $180 dropped below $90 in less than 24 hours, a collapse that stadium vendors felt directly in lost concession sales. Attendance fell by nearly 8,000 bodies, which translates to hundreds of thousands in lost food, beverage, and parking revenue for one night. Multiply that across multiple weeks, and the local economic impact alone becomes significant. For ownership, particularly Jimmy Haslam, who has already made controversial moves tied to financial motivations, Sanders' absence threatened not only national revenue streams but local profitability in real time. There's also the gambling layer, where the NFL has aggressively partnered with sportsbooks to increase fan engagement. Sanders' debut produced a surge in rookie-related prop bets that tripled typical preseason volumes. His absence wiped that out, and FanDuel, DraftKings, and BetMGM all reported Browns-related wagers had fallen by 40% compared to the prior week. That matters because the NFL takes in significant sponsorship revenue from these operators, who expect consistent engagement to justify those deals. When bettors stop putting money on games, sportsbooks pressure the league, and the league inevitably pressures teams to make star players more available. The desperation narrative is further heightened by how much the NFL has already leaned into Sanders in its broader branding. Social media accounts for the league featured him in more posts during his debut week than any other rookie, and his clips outperformed highlight reels from veterans. By removing him from the screen, the NFL's own engagement metrics fell, forcing content teams to recycle generic stories just to meet quotas. That cycle not only reveals how dependent the league has become on Sanders, but also how vulnerable its short-term business model is if he's not featured. In the deeper context, this isn't simply about a young quarterback missing time. It's about the league exposing its reliance on a single player to maintain financial stability across multiple verticals: television, streaming, sponsorships, gambling, merchandise, and even local economics. For a league that insists its brand is bigger than any one star, the business data around Sanders' absence tells the opposite story. Every lost snap isn't just a developmental delay, it's lost money, lost engagement, and lost leverage in negotiations that shape the league's billion-dollar ecosystem. That reality explains why executives sound desperate, because desperation is exactly what the numbers reflect. If Shedeur Sanders' absence rattled the league in the short term, the longer-term implications paint an even more precarious picture. If this trend of missed games continues, the Browns' internal evaluation process becomes severely compromised. Kevin Stefanski and Andrew Berry built much of their roster logic around Sanders being the centerpiece, not just in talent, but in financial structuring. A rookie quarterback under a manageable contract frees up cap space elsewhere. Yet without reps, Cleveland risks entering the regular season unsure if Sanders can handle the speed of pro defenses. That uncertainty could force the team to keep Dylan Gabriel or another veteran option more involved than originally planned, creating a quarterback controversy that dilutes practice reps and divides locker room confidence. Historically, teams that enter the regular season without clarity at quarterback suffer in win probability models by nearly 15%, and those odds drop even further if fan pressure accelerates decisions the coaching staff isn't ready to make. For the NFL itself, the projection is more blunt. Ratings will continue to slide if Sanders isn't consistently visible. Network schedules are already locked, but primetime matchups without Sanders could underperform by millions of viewers. Imagine a Sunday night slot built around Sanders' first regular season showdown suddenly downgraded because he isn't active. Networks could lose tens of millions in ad revenue, while sponsors lean on the league for compensation. The NFL thrives on predictable rating strength, and Sanders has disrupted that model by becoming a single point of failure. If his absence extends into September, executives will be staring at quarterly earnings reports that show softness not seen since the 2017 national anthem controversies, which temporarily drove a 10% league-wide ratings decline. The stakes are that high. From a fan perspective, the trajectory could shift from excitement to fatigue. Right now, Sanders' every appearance sparks hype, but repeated absences could sour the narrative. Browns fans who once flooded the resale market to attend preseason games may hesitate to buy into regular season tickets if availability remains uncertain. Nationally, casual viewers drawn by Sanders' college to NFL storyline might move on if they feel the league is teasing but not delivering. That attrition is dangerous because it's those casual fans, not the diehards, who inflate generate rating spikes by millions. Losing them could mean the difference between another record-breaking season and a flatlining curve that undermines negotiations with Amazon, ESPN, and other streaming partners. The gambling industry adds another layer to the future risk. If Sanders remains absent, sportsbooks will lose one of their most bankable betting assets. Rookie quarterbacks don't typically generate high prop action, but Sanders has bucked that trend, turning his rushing totals, passing yards, and touchdown props into headline wagers. Without him, betting slips will skew back toward established stars, leaving Browns games with minimal national gambling engagement. That shift weakens the NFL's lucrative partnerships with operators who expected Sanders-driven traffic spikes. If the handle continues to underperform, those companies may seek to renegotiate deals or demand expanded integrations to offset the loss. For Sanders himself, the implications are double-edged. On one hand, every missed rep risks stunting his development. Young quarterbacks need to build timing, chemistry, and rhythm against live defenses, and the longer he sits, the harder it becomes to catch up mid-season. On the other hand, the spotlight created by these numbers forces Cleveland to weigh whether keeping him on the bench is even an option. Unlike Patrick Mahomes, who had the luxury of sitting behind Alex Smith, Sanders doesn't inherit that cushion. The business environment practically mandates his presence, and that could accelerate his path into the starting role even if Stefanski's coaching instincts suggest caution. It's a recipe for tension. The league wants him on screen, sponsors want him in ads, fans want him under center, but the Browns coaching staff may not think he's ready. Balancing those forces could define not just his rookie year, but his entire trajectory. Zooming out, the playoff implications can't be ignored. Cleveland's roster is built to contend, with defensive stars and skill players aligned for a window right now. If quarterback instability stemming from Sanders' absence leads to a 1-3 or 2-4 start, the Browns could watch a postseason opportunity slip away. Models from 538 and ESPN Analytics consistently show that starting 2 to 4 drops playoff odds below 30%, even for talented rosters. That's not just a local disappointment, it's a national storyline that strips the NFL of one of its most marketable playoff pushes. Sanders' visibility is tied not only to TV ratings, but to Cleveland's ability to stay relevant deep into January. If he isn't ready and Cleveland stumbles, the league loses a narrative anchor during its most lucrative stretch of the calendar. Perhaps the most critical implication is cultural. The NFL has never leaned this hard on a rookie to carry national business narratives, and if Sanders misses more time, it will expose how fragile that model is. The league could face tough questions about whether it overmarketed a player too soon, or whether its financial ecosystem has grown too dependent on star-driven engagement at the expense of competitive depth. In the future, this could change how the NFL handles rookie rollouts entirely, either doubling down by fast-tracking stars into action or recalibrating marketing strategies to avoid desperation when absences occur. In the end, the projection is stark. If Sanders keeps missing games, Cleveland risks internal turmoil, the NFL risks rating stagnation, sponsors risk ROI failures, and fans risk disengagement. The league's desperate tone isn't just reactive, it's predictive. They see the potential outcomes, and none of them are acceptable. That's why every decision from here carries weight far beyond Cleveland. It shapes how the NFL will navigate star power, media leverage, and fan loyalty in an era where one rookie quarterback can tilt the scales of the entire sport. Shedeur Sanders has not yet thrown a single regular season touchdown in the NFL, but already his absence has exposed how much weight the league is placing on his shoulders. One missed game sent television ratings tumbling, ticket resale markets collapsing, merchandise sales cooling, and gambling handle shrinking in ways no other rookie has ever triggered. That is why the word desperate is fitting. The NFL is acting like a billion-dollar empire tethered to the availability of one young quarterback. Cleveland now faces a dual challenge, preparing Sanders the right way for the grind of a full season, while navigating national pressure to showcase him sooner than they may want. For the league, the lesson is clear. This isn't just hype, it's measurable business impact. Sanders has become the rare rookie whose presence drives rating spikes, and whose absence leaves networks, sponsors, and fans restless. The bigger question is what happens next. Can the NFL afford to lean so heavily on Sanders to prop up its numbers without risking burnout or overexposure? And if Cleveland takes a cautious path, will fans and networks have the patience to wait? Or will the desperation for ratings force the league's hand?